The first-class cabin of British Airways Flight 293, bound from New York to London, was usually a sanctuary of muted luxury, a cocoon of leather, polished oak, and hushed efficiency. It was a place where business was conducted in whispers and sleep was currency. Today, however, that tranquility was being systematically dismantled by Beverly. My business partner, Marcus Vance, sat in 1A, the coveted window seat on the port side. Marcus wasn't just wealthy. He was in that rarefied echelon of power, where wealth translates into absolute control over one's schedule, one's environment, and often one's fate. He was the founder and CEO of Apex Global, a firm that specialized in last-mile logistics optimization, currently on the cusp of finalizing a historic deal to acquire Europe's largest competitor. He needed this 8-hour flight to be 8 hours of uninterrupted focus. He had settled in immediately after boarding, his briefcase, which cost more than my first car, placed neatly under the ottoman. He'd slipped into his noise-canceling headset and was already bathed in the blue-white light of his specialized hardened tablet, reviewing the final terms of the acquisition presentation he was due to deliver at 8 a.m. London time, a deal worth over $7.2 billion. Ethan Hayes, his chief strategy officer, was across the aisle in 1C. My job, besides strategy, often involved being Marcus's personal, highly paid shield against the mundane, or in this case, the maniacal. The chaos began with a sound that should never exist in first class, a loud, resentful huff. Beverly, a woman whose entire demeanor screamed unearned vacation, had paused at the aisle, her face a mask of escalating outrage. Her outfit was an unfortunate pairing of expensive labels and poor coordination, and her luggage, a bright pink hard-shell monstrosity, was currently jamming the narrow aisle. "Excuse me," Beverly's voice was pitched high, a jarring, grating sound that cut through the low jazz playing softly on the cabin speakers. She waved a boarding pass in the air like a surrender flag. "I think there's been a mistake. My seat is 2B. This entire section is defective." A flight attendant, a young woman named Zara, approached quickly, her smile professional but brittle. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome aboard. How can I help you?" "Help me? You can give me a seat that isn't trapped in the middle." Beverly gestured wildly at 2B, a fine, comfortable aisle seat in the middle section of the first-class pod. "I travel extensively. I demand a window. I demand space. This is unacceptable for a ticket I paid for." Zara maintained her composure. "I understand your preference, ma'am, but 2B is an excellent seat. All our first-class pods offer exceptional privacy and space." "Don't patronize me!" "I see that man there." Beverly jabbed a finger at Marcus, who remained oblivious, immersed in his presentation. "He's got the best seat. The light, the view, the power of the window. I want that seat. I am claustrophobic, and this is an emergency. It's a medical necessity. Move him!" My fingers instinctively tightened around my tablet. Marcus, in his current state of deep concentration, was a sacred entity. To interrupt him now was to invite financial catastrophe. Zara glanced nervously at Marcus, then back at Beverly. "Ma'am, I truly apologize, but our flight is fully booked. The gentleman in 1A selected that seat months ago. We cannot simply relocate a passenger from a premium seat without their consent." "Consent? This is customer service. I am a high-value customer. My husband is a—" Beverly paused dramatically, searching for a title with enough weight. "A regional VP for a mid-level insurance firm. This is going in my complaint letter to corporate. Mark my words. I want that seat, and I want it now before the doors close." The entire front section of the cabin, 3 other passengers, all titans of industry or quiet celebrities, had gone stock still, their heads subtly lowered, pretending the drama wasn't unfolding feet from them. The cabin's hushed atmosphere had been replaced by a dense, suffocating tension. I slid out of 1C and intercepted Zara, speaking in a low, firm tone. "Zara, this is Mr. Vance's seat. He is preparing for a time-critical, high-stakes meeting upon landing. He will not be moving. Please inform her that any further disruption will be considered a breach of safety protocol." Beverly whipped her head toward me, her eyes locking onto me like a heat-seeking missile. "Oh, look. His little assistant is here to play tough guy. Who are you, his secretary? I don't care about his high-stakes meeting. My need for a window seat trumps his childish little presentation. Move him! Now, she finished with a truly impressive theatrical stomp. Marcus, at the sound of the final echoing stomp, finally paused. He didn't look up, but his fingers stopped hovering over the screen. He knew Zara was visibly shaking. The pressure was mounting, and the last thing any flight crew wanted was a screaming passenger delaying pushback. Mr. Hayes, I need to try to de-escalate this. Ma'am, perhaps we can offer you a beverage voucher or an upgrade on your return flight if you could just please take your assigned seat for the safety briefing. No deals, Beverly shrieked. I want 1A. I want his seat. If I don't get this seat, I'll claim discrimination. I'll call the FAA. I'll make sure every single one of your careers ends tonight. She pushed past Zara and planted herself right next to Marcus's pod, leaning down, invading his personal space. Listen, mister, she snarled, projecting her voice directly over the armrest. I'm talking to you. You are going to get up right now and give me this seat. I don't care what you're working on. I need it more than you do. Do you understand? The absolute, unadulterated arrogance of the statement hung in the air, heavy and noxious. Marcus, the multi-billion-dollar deal, the entire fate of Apex Global's European expansion, had just been reduced to a childish little presentation. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus removed his headphones. He placed them on the side table, folded his hands over his tablet screen, and finally raised his eyes to meet hers. His gaze wasn't angry. It was worse. It was clinically detached, like a scientist observing an interesting, albeit annoying, specimen under glass. I understand. Marcus's voice was a low baritone, so calm it was chilling. You are demanding this seat, which I paid for and confirmed, based on a self-diagnosed medical necessity and a threat to disrupt the flight, correct? Beverly puffed up, misinterpreting his calm as surrender. Exactly. Now, are you going to move, or do I have to involve security? Marcus didn't move an inch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned forward, his focus now absolute. Ma'am, he said, his voice now colder than the pressurized cabin air, I will not be moving, not because of preference, but because this seat, and the 10 minutes of concentration remaining before pushback, is currently facilitating a transaction that will secure employment for 35,000 people across 3 continents, and stabilize the supply chain for a dozen major global corporations. Beverly merely rolled her eyes. Oh, please, stop with the drama. I'm sure your little job is very important, but I'm serious. I'm going to call my lawyer right now. She fumbled for her phone. Marcus didn't react to the phone. He turned his attention to Zara, the terrified flight attendant. Zara, Marcus said, his voice taking on the sharp, clear edge of a boardroom command. Do you have the contact information for the head of corporate communications at British Airways? Zara swallowed hard. Yes, sir, I believe so. It's not something we usually... Good. I need you to inform them that they have a choice to make. They can either remove this passenger immediately for disruption and threats, or I will contact my legal team and have my personal security details meet this flight in London. Either way, this aircraft does not push back with her in my immediate vicinity, or I will instruct my firm to publicly cancel the $4.5 million corporate travel contract we renewed with this airline last quarter. Effective immediately, the cabin went silent. The other 3 passengers now looked up, their eyes wide. They didn't know Marcus, but they understood the weight of that number. $4.5 million, Beverly froze, her hand halfway to her ear, the phone slipping slightly. The realization, the cold, hard, sickening comprehension that she had just screamed at a man who commanded more money in airfare than her husband made in a decade, began to dawn. Marcus looked directly at her, his eyes glacial. He didn't have to shout or use vulgarity. His power was in the quiet, clinical efficiency of his response. He was not arguing over a seat. He was executing a contract. You demanded a consequence, Marcus finished, leaning back into the luxurious embrace of 1A, already picking up his headphones. You got one. The final shattering beat was not the sound of a door closing, but the chilling realization in Beverly's eyes that she had picked a fight not with a tired traveler, but with a force of nature, and the hammer was already swinging. The air in the first-class cabin didn't just grow heavy, It became brittle, like thin ice stretched over a deep black chasm. Marcus, having delivered his statement, a casual multi-million-dollar termination threat, simply put his noise-canceling headphones back on. The gesture was final, a slam of an invisible door that sealed Beverly's fate in that moment. He returned instantly to the $7.2 billion acquisition review, the chaos around him now just a low-frequency rumble he'd outsourced to the airline to manage. I watched Beverly. Her face, minutes earlier a canvas of entitlement and indignation, was now undergoing a ghastly transformation. First came shock, the jaw slightly slack, the eyes wide and fixed on Marcus. Then confusion, as if her brain was struggling to reconcile the reality of a multi-million-dollar contract with her perception of a simple window seat dispute. Finally, denial, burning hot and defensive. "This is a bluff," she hissed, though her voice was now a ragged whisper, drained of its earlier theatrical volume. She directed the accusation not at Marcus, who couldn't hear her, but at Zara, the flight attendant. "He is a nobody. He's trying to intimidate you. Regional VP's wife. That contract is fake." Zara didn't respond. She just stared at me, her eyes pleading for direction, for rescue. She was a professional trying to navigate a crisis that involved a customer who had gone nuclear and another who held the economic fate of her entire department in his hands. "Zara," I said, stepping closer to the flight attendant, keeping my voice low and authoritative. "Go to the flight deck. Relay the exact content of Mr. Vance's message to the captain. Emphasize the $4.5 million figure and the phrase, immediate termination of contract. This is now a corporate-level emergency, not a seat dispute. Do it now." Zara nodded once, her movements jerky and fast, and vanished through the curtain leading to the galley. Beverly, sensing the control slipping entirely away, spun toward me. You're in on this." "You think you can just bully people?" "My husband, Gary, he knows people. He will call his contacts and you'll both be blacklisted. You'll lose your company. You'll see." I met her gaze levelly. "Marcus Vance is the company, Beverly. And you just threatened the career stability of 35,000 people. You called that a childish little presentation. The plane has not pushed back. You have delayed a critical global departure. You have breached safety protocol. The consequences you face are no longer about a seat. They are about corporate liability and flight disruption." My words seemed to land like a physical blow. She started to tremble, the color draining from her cheeks, leaving behind the garish traces of heavy makeup. She was finally seeing the iceberg she had carelessly rammed. A minute later, the voice of the captain, deep, calm, and laced with distinct authority, boomed over the intercom, cutting through the cabin's tense silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently experiencing an unexpected operational delay. We regret that pushback will be postponed. We ask all passengers to remain seated and patient while we resolve a critical issue in the first-class cabin. We apologize for the inconvenience. The announcement sealed it." She had officially delayed the flight. The other first-class passengers, the two quiet businessmen and the celebrity whose face I almost recognized, began to stir. One of the businessmen, a thin man in a perfectly tailored suit, leaned across his pod and spoke to me. "Hayes, is it? Tell your boss he did the right thing. If she delays my connection to Geneva, I'll match his cancellation notice with my own. The leverage is clearly yours. Execute swiftly." The pressure was mounting on the airline, not on us. Just then the galley curtain swished open, and a man in a crisp uniform, the head purser, a stern-faced, silver-haired gentleman named Arthur, strode out, followed by a deeply worried Zara. Arthur looked like a man who hadn't had to physically remove a passenger in 2 decades, and the effort was visibly aging him. Arthur approached Beverly, his voice sharp and utterly devoid of the usual airline warmth. "Ma'am, I am Arthur, the head purser. The captain has been fully briefed. Due to your continued verbal aggression and refusal to comply with crew instructions, and the unacceptable delay you are causing, you are now in breach of the conditions of carriage." Beverly's eyes darted wildly, searching for a path of retreat, a lifeline. "Wait, I said I was claustrophobic. It's a medical emergency. You can't legally—" "The captain has determined your behavior constitutes a disruption, ma'am. You have 2 options. You can immediately return to your assigned seat, 2B, and remain silent for the duration of the flight, in which case the airline may consider mitigating the filing of a formal incident report. Or you will be escorted off this aircraft immediately, and the matter will be handed over to airport security, the Port Authority, and British Airways legal. Arthur's voice was a hammer blow. Beverly, however, had the desperate, cornered energy of a wounded animal. She didn't move towards 2B. She looked at the expensive, inviting window seat 1A. She felt the eyes of the other high-status passengers on her. Retreating to 2B felt like a permanent admission of defeat, a walk of shame she couldn't tolerate. "I won't take 2B," she screamed, the hysteria returning louder this time. "If I'm not getting the window, I'm not going anywhere. I paid for first class. You can't do this to me! I demand to speak to the captain face to face." Arthur's jaw tightened. He signaled Zara, who immediately picked up the cabin intercom. "Flight deck, we need ground security immediately at gate 42. Passenger refusal to comply." The final irrevocable steps were being taken. This was no longer just a temper tantrum. It was an involuntary exit. As Zara made the call, Beverly's mind seemed to snap from aggression to sheer terror. She realized that not only was she losing the seat, but she was about to be detained, potentially fined, and quite possibly banned from the airline. She lunged towards Marcus's pod, her hands reaching out, not to strike, but to desperately plead. "Please, please, mister! It's just a seat! Tell them it's okay. Tell them I'll move. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't know who you were. I was having a bad day. My husband will kill me if I get kicked off this flight. Please, just tell them to stop the security call." Marcus didn't move. His headphones remained firmly in place, the world outside his sound-isolated bubble irrelevant. His silence was the ultimate punishment. He had given his ultimatum. The resolution was no longer his to manage, but the airline's. He was observing the principle of the consequence, the natural, painful result of an action. I stepped in front of Beverly, blocking her lunge. "It's too late. The call is made. You should have taken 2B when you had the chance." Footsteps pounded outside the door of the jetway, followed by the clatter of heavy equipment. Two burly, uniformed Port Authority officers, one male, one female, entered the cabin. Their faces were grim, their presence a stark, unmistakable symbol of authority. The temperature in the cabin dropped another 10 degrees. "We have a report of an unruly passenger refusing instructions," the male officer stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Ma'am, you need to gather your belongings and come with us now." Beverly looked at the officer, then at her bright pink suitcase, then at the window seat, then at the unforgiving, silent figure of Marcus Vance. The reality of her situation, being forcibly removed from a first-class flight in front of millionaires, finally crashed down. She dissolved, not into rage, but into guttural, ragged sobs. She was marched off the plane, her pink luggage trailing sadly behind her, a vivid, pathetic counterpoint to the tailored gray uniforms of the officers. The entire process took less than 3 minutes from the moment the officers appeared. Arthur, the head purser, looked exhausted. He straightened his tie and then walked directly to Marcus's pod, pausing respectfully until Marcus lowered his headphones. "Mr. Vance, my profound apologies for the disruption. She has been removed and the Port Authority is handling the formal incident report. We will ensure she faces the full consequences of the delay. The jetway door is closing now. We are clear for pushback." Marcus simply gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. He did not ask her name, did not ask what would happen next, and did not spare her another thought. He adjusted his focus back to the multi-billion-dollar deal. As the heavy jetway door hissed shut and the enormous Airbus A380 began its slow, inevitable lurch backward from the gate, I looked out the window of 1C. Through the rain-streaked glass, I caught a glimpse of Beverly. She was standing under the fluorescent lights of the deserted gate area, alone, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking. The two Port Authority officers were standing several feet away, letting her process the sheer scale of the disaster she had wrought. The plane taxied toward the runway, gaining speed, carrying us toward a massive financial victory. But the true deep twist of the knife, the karmic shock that would define her regret, was just beginning to unfold. She had been removed from the flight, but what she was about to lose was far, far greater than a window seat. I noticed her phone, which she'd dropped in her desperate lunge, still lying innocently on the carpet between the pods. She hadn't just lost her flight. She was now completely incommunicado, thousands of miles from her final destination, grounded and facing an incident report, and completely cut off from the one person who could bail her out, her husband. The flight attendant, Zara, saw the phone, but the purser was already signal. The shift from the claustrophobic tension of the jetway in New York to the efficient, muted hum of the Apex Global car service in London was jarring. We landed 20 minutes late, a minor delay thanks to Beverly's tantrum, but still well within the window Marcus had calculated. The delay only seemed to sharpen his focus, transforming the residual annoyance into a razor-edge determination. The acquisition is everything. Ethan, Marcus stated, not looking up from his presentation, which was now fully optimized for the massive screen embedded in the car's console. The minor operational hiccup is irrelevant. We lost 4 minutes of prep time. Compensate. Already compensated, I replied, checking my separate tablet. I preemptively moved the pre-meeting brief with the legal counsel forward by 10 minutes. They'll meet us at the door of the building, not inside. You gain 6 minutes back? Marcus gave a short, satisfied nod. That was the essence of working with him, the immediate surgical execution of problem-solving. A screaming woman was a momentary inconvenience. A delay to a multi-billion-dollar deal was a flaw in the system that needed immediate correction. We arrived at the towering glass-fronted headquarters of Argos Logistics in Canary Wharf with minutes to spare. Marcus Vance, impeccable in his charcoal suit, moved through the revolving door with the contained energy of a coiled spring. The next 3 hours were a blur of high finance, charts, projections, valuations, and Marcus's signature ice-cold delivery that mixed brutal logic with compelling vision. While Marcus was dismantling the Argos board, piece by precise piece, I kept my phone on silent vibrate, monitoring the peripheral damage. My attention was split between confirming market stability and watching the slow-motion car crash unfolding across the Atlantic. The threat Marcus issued wasn't empty. Marcus Vance's business, Apex Global, utilized British Airways' corporate logistics package heavily, flying executives and specialized cargo daily. The $4.5 million contract was real, and the loss of it would cause severe headaches for BA's global sales division. During a tense 15-minute coffee break, the kind of break where nobody actually drinks coffee, I received a series of cryptic, panicked messages from our corporate travel coordinator, followed by a leaked internal email thread. Subject: Urgent. Apex Global contract risk. Need immediate contact for Gary Henderson. The head of corporate communications for British Airways had, within 2 hours of our plane's takeoff, gone directly to the executive level of our travel firm's insurance partner, the place where Beverly's husband, Gary Henderson, served as a regional vice president. The airline's message was blunt. A first-class passenger had caused a major, reportable flight disruption, and the passenger claimed to be married to a key executive at a firm that did substantial business with Apex Global, which was threatening contract termination. The airline needed to confirm the relationship and apply pressure to the passenger through the husband's employer, demonstrating due diligence to Marcus Vance. It wasn't that Gary was a villain. He was just a man caught in the blast radius of his wife's self-inflicted explosion. His regional VP title, which Beverly had wielded like a shield, was the very thing that made him an accessible and vulnerable target. I learned from the email thread that Gary's company, Sterling Shield Insurance, had been notified. The HR department at Sterling Shield, seeing the names Apex Global, British Airways, and Flight Disruption in the same email, had initiated their own aggressive internal review. Gary wasn't in any meetings today. He was on a golf course in Connecticut. The deal closed exactly at 11:30 a.m. The Argos board, comprised of stiff, old-money European executives, offered Marcus a bottle of vintage Bordeaux. Marcus declined the wine but accepted the handshake, the motion signifying the transfer of billions. The atmosphere immediately became lighter, filled with congratulations and the low buzz of victory. "Gentlemen, let's wrap this up," Marcus announced, already looking toward the next logistical hurdle. "Ethan, book a private jet to Zurich for 4 p.m. We have the integration team waiting." As we stood in the expansive, sun-drenched boardroom, the acquisition documents spread out on the polished mahogany table, I finally took the call that had been vibrating my phone non-stop. It was an anonymous number, but I recognized the frantic undertone in the voice. It was David, the head of HR at Sterling Shield Insurance, Gary Henderson's employer. I stepped into the quiet hallway, pulling the phone to my ear. "Mr. Hayes, this is David from Sterling Shield. I am calling regarding one of our regional executives, Gary Henderson, and a highly unfortunate incident involving a passenger named Beverly Henderson at JFK last night." "I'm familiar with the incident," I stated calmly, watching Marcus stride out of the boardroom, radiating satisfaction. "I was present." David's voice became a tortured plea. "Mr. Hayes, we are trying to manage the severe reputational risk here. Mrs. Henderson is currently being detained by the Port Authority, facing a federal incident report, and we are being hounded by British Airways corporate. They are terrified of losing the Apex Global contract. Gary, Mr. Henderson, is an excellent VP, but this situation, especially the alleged use of his title to escalate the disruption, it violates several clauses in his employment agreement regarding corporate integrity." "And what is Sterling Shield's official response?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral but focusing on the consequence. "Our CEO is furious," David admitted, his voice cracking. "We are a service provider to Apex Global, Mr. Hayes. We are in a strategic partnership. We are cutting our losses. We have to be seen to be acting decisively. We are preparing to issue a termination letter to Gary effective immediately. We need you to confirm confidentially that this action, the termination, would satisfy Mr. Vance and allow Apex Global to retain the contract with British Airways." I absorbed the news. Gary Henderson was about to lose his 6-figure corporate job, the very foundation of Beverly's entitlement, not for anything he did, but for what his wife, the regional VP's wife, had done over a window seat. It was swift, clinical, and total financial annihilation. "Mr. Vance has a singular focus, David," I replied, my voice dry. "He demands reliability and zero disruption. He does not seek revenge. He sought an acceptable resolution to a breach of service. If the airline and its partners take demonstrable, serious action to ensure Apex Global's travel experience is never compromised in this manner again, then the matter, as far as Mr. Vance is concerned, is resolved." It was the closest I could get to confirmation without explicitly demanding Gary's firing. The silence on the other end of the line confirmed the inevitable. Sterling Shield was throwing Gary under the bus to appease a client worth more than their entire regional division. I ended the call and walked back to Marcus, who was now exchanging final pleasantries. "Zurich confirmed," I reported. "The Argos acquisition is secure. Also, a quick update on the JFK incident. The collateral damage has been contained, sir." Marcus paused, finally looking at me, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Contained how, Ethan?" "The airline's primary partner, Sterling Shield Insurance, fired the regional VP, Gary Henderson, the husband of the passenger. They did it to appease British Airways, who in turn were trying to prevent us from pulling our contract. He's been terminated for reputational risk associated with his wife's behavior on the aircraft." A faint, almost invisible smile touched Marcus's lips. It wasn't the smile of victory, but of validation. "He lost his job?" Marcus murmured, buttoning his coat, effective immediately. "He's out. She destroyed his career over a window seat." Marcus took a final look around the opulent boardroom, the quiet, high-altitude view of London spread out before him. "Then I suppose," he said, heading for the door, "the consequence was sufficient. Let's go, Ethan. We have a private jet waiting." The immense, multi-billion-dollar Apex Global acquisition had been successfully executed. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Beverly, still stranded and phoneless at JFK, was about to discover that the man she had insulted was not only untouchable, but the cause of her and her husband's complete financial ruin. Her husband, Gary, was at that exact moment receiving the final, brutal email notification on his golf course tablet, realizing that his wife's single moment of entitlement had cost him everything. The fluorescent lights of the JFK Port Authority office were harsh and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the plush dimness of the first-class cabin. Beverly was no longer screaming. The aggressive theatricality of her entitlement had been scraped away, replaced by a raw, shivering panic. She sat on a hard plastic chair, clutching a sheaf of documents that amounted to a Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) incident report and a provisional fine notice. The officers, efficient and detached, had processed her with the tedious formality reserved for common disruptors. Her attempts to invoke her husband's title were met with blank stares, and her frantic pleas about her missing phone were dismissed. "Ma'am, you've been released. Your immediate travel has been suspended pending review of the FAA report. You need to contact your spouse or counsel immediately to arrange transportation and address the legal implications," the female officer stated flatly, pointing toward the exit. Beverly finally managed to connect with the world hours later, borrowing a cracked pay-as-you-go phone from an airport shuttle driver. She didn't call Gary first. She called her sister, hysterically demanding that Gary be alerted and instructed to meet her immediately. She still hadn't grasped the severity of the situation. In her mind, this was a massive inconvenience, an injustice that Gary, the regional VP, would easily smooth over with a few calls and a stern letter from the family attorney. Meanwhile, 3 states away on the manicured greens of the Port Haven Country Club in Connecticut, Gary Henderson felt the digital equivalent of a lightning strike. He was halfway through the 14th hole, savoring a particularly clean chip shot, when his golf cart tablet buzzed with a series of alerts. The final email, a PDF attachment from Sterling Shield HR titled Urgent Employment Termination Notification, dropped like a depth charge. Gary stared at the screen, the turquoise waters of the nearby pond reflecting the stunned horror in his eyes. Gross misconduct, breach of corporate integrity and reputational risk. Immediate effect. No severance. His mind struggled to process the legalistic language against the backdrop of a perfectly sunny afternoon. The company that had been his ladder for 15 years had just decapitated his career, all to appease an airline that was trying to appease an anonymous $4.5 million client. He didn't need to read the full context to know the cause. Beverly. She had done exactly what he had warned her against 1,000 times, using his professional weight as a weapon in a personal war. But never, not in his worst nightmares, did he imagine the recoil would be this catastrophic. He abandoned his game, the clubs left haphazardly in the cart. He drove home in a blinding, white-hot fury, not fueled by the loss of the job itself, but by the sheer, unbridled stupidity of the trigger. The silence in their custom-built, oversized colonial home felt deafening when he arrived. He paced, waiting for his wife, the architect of his ruin. Beverly arrived 3 hours later, dropped off by the same airport shuttle driver she had bribed. She stumbled through the front door, exhausted, tear-streaked, but still brimming with righteous indignation. "Gary."
"Oh, thank God."
"It was a nightmare, honey. They had me in a room for hours. You won't believe the things they said. I need you to call Mark the lawyer right now. We are going to sue that airline for harassment and false detainment, and we're going to drag that hideous man out of his seat and into court." She rushed toward him, expecting comfort, strategy, and validation. Gary stood absolutely still in the center of the marble foyer. He looked less like her husband and more like an executioner awaiting his final order. "Where is your phone, Beverly?" he asked, his voice low, dangerously even. Beverly flinched, pulling back. I lost it on the plane." In the chaos, they wouldn't even help me look. "See? More harassment. Now call Mark." "There is no Mark, Beverly," Gary said, the words cutting through the air like shards of glass. "There is no Mark, because as of 3:00 p.m. Eastern Time, you no longer have a husband who can afford Mark. Or this house. Or your shopping habit. Or anything else?" Beverly froze, her breath catching. "What are you talking about, Gary?" "Stop being dramatic. We have savings." "I was fired." He spat the word out, the contained rage finally starting to boil over. "Terminated. Effective immediately. No severance. Reputational risk. Due to your actions, Beverly. due to you screaming that my title, Regional Vice President, gave you the right to steal a stranger's seat. He walked over to the side table, picked up his tablet, and threw it onto the marble floor. It didn't shatter, but the loud thud echoed in the silence. He opened the termination email and thrust the screen into her face. Read it. Read how your tantrum cost me my career. Sterling Shield terminated me because British Airways was terrified of losing a $4.5 million corporate contract with Apex Global. The man you were screaming at was not just some traveler, Beverly. He was the CEO of the company that dictates the travel policy for an entire global sector. You didn't just demand a seat. You demanded a corporate war with a man who ends careers with a phone call. The truth hit her not as a single blow, but as a series of concussive shockwaves. The image of Marcus Vance so calmly removing his headphones, so clinically stating the price of her disruption, came flooding back. The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of the force she had carelessly unleashed. No, that can't be right, she whispered, her hands shaking as she backed away. You're exaggerating. You can get another job, Gary. This is temporary. It was just a misunderstanding. Gary laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that tore at the quiet of the foyer. A misunderstanding? You were detained by the Port Authority, Beverly. You are facing an FAA fine. The man you antagonized just closed a $7.2 billion acquisition this morning. He didn't care about you. He cared about the efficiency of his schedule. And when you disrupted that, he didn't fight you. He simply pointed to the cost of the disruption, and the airline, and by extension my company, liquidated me to mitigate the damage. He ran a hand over his face, his fury now morphing into a deep, painful weariness. We don't just lose the income, Beverly. We lose the standing. I have a major non-compete clause, and you have just tainted my reputation in every major insurance firm on the eastern seaboard. You have burned the bridge, the foundation, and the very ground we stood on, all because you couldn't handle sitting in 2B. Beverly looked down at the FAA report in her hands. The fine was steep, the charges serious, but the paperwork was now dwarfed by the financial ruin Gary had just outlined. She thought of the pink suitcase still sitting by the door, the symbol of her failed, expensive trip. She thought of the phone, lost forever, separating her from the one resource she still desperately needed. What do we do? She finally managed, the entitlement completely gone, replaced by a hollow echo of terror. Gary looked at her, his eyes cold and empty, staring at the woman who had just signed the death warrant for their future. What we do, Gary said, the finality in his voice absolute, is we figure out how to sell this house before the first mortgage payment comes due, and you start looking for a job, because the regional vice president is officially unemployed. He turned and walked away, not toward the bedroom or the kitchen, but into the dimly lit home office, closing the heavy oak door behind him. The sound of the lock clicking into place was the final, devastating beat, Beverly's absolute isolation in the wreckage of their shared life.